Josie Fletcher's hands shook as she aimed the rifle at the man on horseback. Her 3 starving siblings huddled behind her in the snow. She'd shoot him if she had to. She'd already lost everything else. But when Colt Bridger looked past her gun to the children shivering in rags, he said 4 words that made her finger freeze on the trigger. "All 4 of you, get in my wagon." She didn't know that the rancher who'd just buried his wife and unborn child was about to trade his grief for theirs, or that saying yes would start a war with the most powerful man in Arizona territory, his own father. Before we begin, hit that subscribe button and stay with this story until the end. Comment your city below so I can see how far Josie's fight for home and family travels across the world. Now let's go back to where it started, to the day the blizzard came early and changed everything. The Winchester felt like ice against Josie's palms, even through her threadbare gloves. December 1876 had arrived 3 weeks early in Arizona territory, bringing snow that no one had prepared for, and cold that killed the unprepared. The Verde Valley, usually red and gold, and shimmering with heat, had disappeared under white that fell and showed no mercy. She'd been aiming the rifle at the rider for 30 seconds now, maybe longer. Time moved strange when you were deciding whether to shoot a man. Behind her, pressed against the half-collapsed lean-to that barely counted as shelter, Ruth sobbed quietly. The kind of crying that came when you were 11 years old and too cold and hungry to remember what warm and full felt like. Ben had stopped crying days ago. At 14, he'd gone silent instead, watching Josie with eyes that asked questions she couldn't answer. Danny, just 6 and burning with fever she couldn't break, didn't cry anymore either. That scared her most of all. "Stay back!" Josie called out, her voice cracking from disuse and cold. They hadn't spoken to another human in 9 days. Not since the widow Morrison had turned them away from her door, citing her own lack and the rumors about Isaiah Fletcher dying with debts he couldn't pay. "I'll shoot. I swear to God I'll shoot." The rider stopped his horse 20 feet out. Through the falling snow, she could barely make out his shape, tall in the saddle, broad across the shoulders, moving with the ease of someone who belonged to this frozen hell, while she and her siblings were just dying in it. "Ma'am?" His voice cut through the wind, steady and low. Not threatening. That somehow made it worse. Threats she understood. Calm she didn't trust. "I'm not here to hurt you." Everyone says that before they hurt you. "I reckon that's true enough." A pause. "How long you been out here?" "Long enough to know when to shoot first and ask questions after. Also fair. Also..." He shifted in his saddle, and Josie's finger tightened on the trigger. "Easy now. Just trying to see better through this damn snow. Name's Colt Bridger. I own the ranch north of here." Bridger. The name hit like a fist. She'd heard it whispered in town before Pa died, always with fear or anger or both. Nathaniel Bridger, who owned half the valley and wanted the other half. Nathaniel Bridger, who'd bought Pa's debt and sent men with foreclosure papers 2 days after they'd buried him. Nathaniel Bridger, who represented everything wrong with Arizona territory power, without mercy, wealth, without conscience. "Then you can ride right back to that ranch," Josie said, her voice hardening. "We've got nothing you can take that you haven't already taken." "I'm not my father." "You're his son. Close enough." Another pause. The snow fell heavier, and through it Josie saw him looking past her to the lean-to. To Ruth's thin shoulders, shaking with cold. To Ben, standing like the scarecrow in clothes 2 sizes too big, everything they owned hanging off his starving frame. To Danny, lying still, too still in the corner. "The little one," Colt Bridger said quietly. "He's sick. That's none of your concern." "How long's he had the fever?" "I said 3 days 4. His voice sharpened with something that sounded almost like fear. "Ma'am, I'm not trying to intrude, but I lost someone to fever just last month. I know what it looks like when time's running out." Josie's aim wavered. Just for a second. Just long enough for the truth to slip through her defenses. Danny was dying. had been dying since the second night of the storm. She'd been rationing their last jar of preserves and the half loaf of bread she'd traded her mother's wedding ring for. Keeping them alive one more hour, one more day, pretending that would be enough. But it wasn't enough. Danny needed medicine, needed warmth, needed things she couldn't give him with empty pockets and a rifle and stubborn pride that kept them freezing in a lean-to instead of begging at doors that wouldn't open anyway. "He needs a doctor," she said finally, the words costing her everything. "But I've got no money, no credit, nothing to trade that anyone wants." "You've got time," Colt said, "if we move fast." He dismounted in one fluid motion, his boots crunching in snow that came up past his ankles. He was tall, taller than she'd thought, and moved with a careful slowness that telegraphed every motion, showing her he wasn't a threat, not reaching for the pistol at his hip or the rifle on his saddle, just standing there in the snow while she pointed a gun at his chest. "There's a doctor in Cottonwood," he said. "Chinese woman named Dr. Chen. She's good. Doesn't care if you can pay long as you actually need help. It's 12 miles through this storm, but I've got a wagon back at my camp with a canvas cover and blankets. We can make it before dark if we leave now." "Why?" The question burst out before Josie could stop it. "Why would you help us?" Something flickered across his face. Grief maybe, or guilt, or some combination she couldn't name. "Because I buried my wife 4 weeks ago, and our baby with her. Because I've spent a month wishing I could have saved them, and I can't, but I can maybe save your brother. Because—" His voice caught rough with emotion. He didn't try to hide. "Because I'm tired of death winning. Let me help you. Please." The please undid her. Men like Colt Bridger didn't say please to women like Josie Fletcher. They gave orders or made demands, or offered charity that came with strings attached. They didn't stand in blizzards asking permission to save dying children. "Ben," Josie said, not lowering the rifle, but shifting her aim slightly to the side, not pointing at Colt anymore, not quite pointing away. "What do you think?" Her brother stepped forward, his young face harder than any 14-year-old's should be. He studied Colt with eyes that had learned suspicion the way other children learn to read. "You Nathaniel Bridger's son?" Ben asked. "I am." "The one who went to West Point?" "That's right." "Why aren't you in the Army?" Colt's jaw tightened. "Served my time. Saw things I'd rather forget. Came home to help run the ranch." "Help run it into our land, you mean?" Ben's voice carried acid. "Your father sent men with papers, said our claim wasn't legal, said we had to leave." "I know." "You know." Ben took a step forward, fists clenched. "You know, and you still—" "Ben!" Josie's voice cut through his anger. "Not now." "He's one of them, Josie. He's—" "I know who he is." She finally lowered the rifle, exhaustion winning over caution. "I also know Danny's dying, and we're out of options. So, unless you've got the better plan, we're taking his help." Ben's face twisted with frustration and fear, and the terrible helplessness of being 14 and unable to fix anything. He looked at Danny's still form, then back at Colt, then at Josie. "If he hurts you," Ben said quietly, "I'll kill him. I don't care if I hang for it." "Noted." Colt replied, his tone respectful rather than mocking. "For what it's worth, I give you my word I won't hurt your family. Any of you. Your father's word isn't worth spit. I'm not my father." "So you keep saying." Ben turned away, shoulders rigid with anger he had nowhere to put. "But words are cheap. We'll see what your actions prove." Colt nodded slowly, accepting the judgment. Then he turned to Josie, and she saw something in his gray eyes that looked almost like relief. Like he'd been as desperate for this moment as she was, though for different reasons she didn't understand yet. "The wagon's a 1/4 mile east," he said. "I was making camp when I saw your lean-to. Thought it was abandoned until I got close enough to see the smoke. Such as it is." He glanced at their pathetic fire barely smoldering in the snow. "I'll carry the little one if you'll allow it. He needs to stay warm." I'll carry him, Ben said, immediately protective instinct overriding his suspicion. All right, your sister then. Colt looked at Ruth, who'd been silent through the entire exchange, watching with those unnervingly perceptive eyes that missed nothing. Miss, can you walk or do you need help? Ruth looked at Josie for permission. When Josie nodded, the girl spoke in a whisper barely audible over the wind. I can walk, but my shoes have holes. Something crossed Colt's face anger, but not at them. At something larger. At a world where 11-year-old girls walked through blizzards in shoes with holes while men like his father bought up land and built empires. We'll fix that, he said quietly. Get you all proper shoes once we reach town. For now, you can ride on my horse. He's steady, won't spook. I've never ridden a horse before. Then today's a day for firsts. Colt moved to his mount a bay gelding that stood patient in the storm. He untied a thick wool coat from behind his saddle and held it out to Ruth. Put this on. It'll be too big, but it's warm. Ruth took the coat with trembling hands, and Josie felt something crack in her chest. Kindness. Such simple kindness. After weeks of doors closing in their faces of townspeople looking through them like they were already ghosts, this stranger, this Bridger, was offering warmth and help and asking nothing in return. She didn't trust it, couldn't afford to. But Danny was dying, and sometimes survival meant accepting help from unlikely sources. We need to pack our things, Josie said, holstering the rifle across her back. There's no time. Whatever you've got, we'll come back for it. There's my father's journal. And Mother's Bible. I'm not leaving them. Colt nodded. Then get them quick. We need to move. Josie ducked into the lean-to, grabbing the leather journal and worn Bible from their hiding spot beneath a loose board. These were the only things of value she had left. Not monetary value, but the kind that mattered. Pa's thoughts and plans. Ma's faith and pressed flowers. Proof that the Fletchers had existed, had loved, had mattered. Ben was already lifting Danny with the care of someone handling something infinitely precious and terrifyingly fragile. The boy's skin was burning hot, even through his fever-damp clothes, his breathing shallow and rapid. He's getting worse, Ben said, fear cracking through his anger. I know. Josie touched Danny's forehead, feeling the heat that meant they were racing against more than just the storm. We're going to fix it. We're going to save him. She said it like a prayer, like saying it could make it true. Colt helped Ruth onto his horse, then took his own coat off and wrapped it around the girl. He stood in the snow in just his shirt and vest, seemingly unbothered by cold that had Josie's teeth chattering. You'll freeze, she protested. I'll manage. Your sister needs it more. He gathered the horse's reins. Stay close. The snow's getting worse. Don't want anyone getting separated. They moved out into the storm, a strange caravan of desperate refugees and their unlikely savior. Colt led his horse with Ruth bundled on top. Ben followed, carrying Danny with fierce determination. Josie brought up the rear rifle ready, watching their guide for any sign of betrayal. The quarter-mile to camp felt like 4 miles. The snow drove into their faces, blinding and relentless. The wind cut through their inadequate clothes with knives made of ice. Josie's feet went numb after the first 100 yards, and she stumbled twice, catching herself before she fell. The second time, Colt appeared at her elbow. Steady. He set his hand on her arm. Not grabbing, just steadying. We're almost there. I'm fine. You're exhausted and half frozen. That's not fine. I said, I heard what you said. His voice gentled. But there's no shame in struggling, Miss Fletcher. You've kept your family alive through something that would have killed most people. You're allowed to be tired. The use of her name startled her. How do you know? Small territory. Word travels. I heard about your father's death. Heard about the foreclosure. His jaw tightened. Heard my father bought your debt for pennies and plans to take your land. If you heard all that, why are you helping us? Because I can't stop my father's plans. Not directly. He's stubborn as bedrock and twice as hard. Colt looked at her fully, and Josie saw genuine regret in his eyes. "But I can do this. I can help 4 people survive a blizzard. Maybe that doesn't balance the scales, but it's something." Before Josie could respond, the camp appeared through the snow. A wagon sat protected under a stand of pine trees, canvas cover already in place. A fire burned in a stone ring, tended and strong. 2 more horses stood hobbled nearby, unbothered by the storm. "Ben, bring the boy here," Colt called, moving to the wagon. He pulled back the canvas, revealing a cargo bed lined with blankets and supplies. "We'll make him a nest. Keep him warm while we move." Ben climbed into the wagon, carefully settling Danny on a pile of blankets that looked softer and cleaner than anything the Fletchers had owned in months. Colt pulled out more blankets, wrapping them around the feverish child with surprising gentleness. "There's a canteen of water," he said. "Get some down him if you can, and Ruth, you climb in too. Stay with your brother. Keep him warm with body heat." Ruth obeyed immediately, curling up next to Danny and pulling him close. The contrast stabbed Josie in the heart, her siblings reduced to skeletons in rags, lying in luxury they'd never expected to see again. "Miss Fletcher, you ride up front with me," Colt said, moving to hitch his horse to the wagon alongside the 2 already there. "Ben, you can ride inside with your siblings or up top. Your choice." "Inside," Ben said immediately, not letting Danny out of his sight. "Smart choice. It'll be warmer." Colt worked with efficient speed, hitching horses and checking harnesses with the competence of someone who'd done it 1,000 times. "We've got 12 miles to Cottonwood. Storm's going to fight us every foot, but these horses are strong, and the wagon's built for rough travel. We'll make it." He said it with such certainty that Josie almost believed him. She climbed onto the wagon seat, her frozen hands fumbling with the footrest. Colt swung up beside her, gathering the reins with practiced ease. He draped another blanket across both their laps, then clicked his tongue. The horses leaned into their harnesses, and the wagon lurched forward into the storm. For the first mile, nobody spoke. Colt focused on driving, navigating by landmarks Josie couldn't see through the snow. She focused on staying conscious, on keeping her eyes open, on not letting the exhaustion and cold drag her under. But eventually, curiosity won over caution. "You said you buried your wife." "I did." "I'm sorry." "So am I." His voice carried weight that spoke of grief too fresh to examine. "Rebecca. Her name was Rebecca. We'd been married 14 months. She was 6 months along when the fever came." "The same fever Danny has?" "No, different kind. Childbed fever. The baby came too early, born dead. Rebecca followed 3 days later." He was quiet for a moment. "Nothing I could do. Nothing the doctor could do. Just had to watch her die and know I was helpless to stop it." Josie understood that helplessness intimately. "My mother died in childbirth too, 5 years ago, the baby with her." "I'm sorry." "So am I." She pulled the blanket tighter. "My father never recovered. He tried. Kept the homestead going. Kept us fed and educated. But something broke in him when she died. He got careless, made bad decisions, took on debt he couldn't service." She stopped, surprised she was sharing this with a stranger, with a Bridger. "When the fever took him too, I wasn't surprised. Think he wanted to go, wanted to be with her again. Leaving you to hold everything together." "Someone had to." "You're 24 years old. That's too young to be responsible for 3 children and a failing homestead. Age doesn't matter when there's no one else." Josie looked back at the wagon bed where her siblings huddled. "They're mine to protect. Mine to keep alive. Whatever it takes. Even accepting help from the son of the man trying to take your land, especially that. Pride's a luxury. Survival isn't." Colt's mouth quirked in something that wasn't quite a smile. "You're practical." "I'm desperate. There's a difference." "Is there?" "Practical means you plan. Desperate means you do whatever the moment demands and pray it works." Josie met his eyes. "Right now, the moment demands I trust you. So I am. But don't mistake that for friendship or forgiveness or anything beyond pure necessity. Wouldn't dream of it. This time his smile was real brief as winter sun. Though I'd argue trust is the foundation of friendship, given time. We don't have time. Once Danny's well, we'll be gone. Gone where? The question hit hard because Josie didn't have an answer. Their land was forfeit. Their home claimed by Nathaniel Bridger's legal maneuvering. They had no money, no prospects, nowhere to go, except maybe back east to relatives who'd never approved of Pa's Western dreams in the first place. Somewhere, she said finally. Anywhere that isn't here. Arizona's not all bad, the valley especially. Beautiful country when it's not trying to kill you. Beautiful country your father's buying up piece by piece. Yes. No defensiveness, just acknowledgement. He's built an empire. Started with nothing, worked his way to everything. The American dream, people call it. Nightmare for those in his way? That too. Colt's hands tightened on the reins. My mother used to moderate him, keep his ambition balanced with compassion. When she died, that balance died with her. Now there's just the drive to acquire, to expand, to win. And you, what do you want? The question seemed to surprise him. He was quiet for long minutes, guiding the wagon through a tricky section where the trail disappeared under snow. I want to build something that matters, he said finally. Not just big, not just profitable, something that actually helps people. That leaves the valley better than I found it. He glanced at her. My father thinks that's weakness, sentiment that has no place in business. What do you think? I think a legacy of fear is no legacy at all. I think empire without conscience is just tyranny with better bookkeeping. His voice hardened. I think I didn't spend 2 years at West Point learning to defend this country just to come home and watch my father oppress the people who make it worth defending. The passion in his words resonated with something in Josie's chest. A recognition of shared values even across the divide of their circumstances. Then why not stop him, she challenged. Why not stand against what he's doing? Because he's my father. Because I'm his only heir. Because walking away means abandoning the ranch hands who depend on us, the people who'd suffer if the ranch failed. He shook his head. Because I keep thinking maybe I can change things from inside. Maybe if I stay I can moderate his worst impulses, guide the ranch toward something better. And can you? I don't know. Haven't managed it yet. He looked at her fully, something raw in his expression. But I'm trying. This helping you, it's part of trying. Proving I'm not him. That a Bridger can choose mercy over profit. Josie wanted to believe him. Wanted to trust that this exhausted, grieving man, driving through a blizzard to save her brother, was genuine in his desire to be different. But trust was expensive, and she'd run out of currency to spend on hope. Actions, she said quietly. Ben was right about that. Words are cheap. Your actions will prove what you are. Then I'd better make sure my actions are worth proving. Colt squared his shoulders, starting with getting your brother to Dr. Chen before his fever takes him. They drove on into the storm, and Josie let herself rest for the first time in days. Not sleep, she didn't dare sleep, but a kind of suspended consciousness, where she wasn't holding everything together alone, where someone else was steering, where for just a few hours the weight shifted to broader shoulders. She didn't trust Colt Bridger, not fully, not yet, but she'd let him carry them through this blizzard. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough. The town of Cottonwood emerged from the white like a promise half kept. 24 buildings huddled together against the storm, their windows glowing with lamplight that meant warmth and safety and everything Josie had stopped believing existed. Her body ached from hours of cold and tension, but seeing those lights made something loosen in her chest. Almost there. Colt said, his voice rough from disuse. They'd been silent for the last hour, focused on survival, on keeping the horses moving through drifts that threatened to trap the wagon. Dr. Chen's place is on the east side, the building with the red door. How do you know she'll help us? It's past dark. She might be closed. Emmy doesn't close, not when people need her. He guided the horses toward a modest building that stood slightly apart from the others. A red door was barely visible through the snow, and above it a sign swung in the wind. Characters Josie couldn't read, and below them in English, Chen Medical. Colt pulled the wagon to a stop and was down before Josie could move his boots, hitting the snow-packed street with purpose. He came around to her side, reaching up to help her down. "I can manage," she said automatically. "I know you can. Let me help anyway." His hands circled her waist and he lifted her down like she weighed nothing. The brief contact sent heat through her frozen body, surprising in its intensity. She stepped back quickly, putting distance between them. "Ben," Colt called, moving to the back of the wagon. "How's Danny?" Ben's face appeared pinched with fear. "Worse. He's not waking up anymore." "Then we move fast." Colt climbed into the wagon bed without waiting for permission, gathering Danny into his arms with the same gentleness he'd shown before. The child looked tiny against his chest, a fragile bundle of bones and fever. "Miss Fletcher, get the door. Ruth, stay with your sister." Josie moved ahead, pushing through the red door into warmth that hit like a wall. The interior was clean and sparse, smelling of herbs and something astringent she couldn't name. A counter stood to one side, and beyond it a door that presumably led to treatment rooms. "Hello," she called. "Dr. Chen, we need help." A woman appeared through the far door, wiping her hands on a cloth. She was perhaps 40, with black hair pulled back severely, and eyes that took in the scene with immediate understanding. When she saw Colt carrying Danny, her expression shifted from curiosity to focus. "Fever?" she asked, her English accented but clear. "Yes, ma'am," Colt replied. 3, maybe 4 days. He's burning up and won't wake. Bring him back here, quickly." She held the door open, gesturing them through. Her gaze found Josie. "You're his mother." "Sister, I'm Josie Fletcher. These are my siblings, Ben, Ruth, and Danny." "I'm Emmy Chen. Your brother will be fine. I've seen worse." She said it with such certainty that Josie wanted to believe her. "The rest of you stay in the front room. There's tea on the stove. Warm yourselves." Colt carried Danny through the door, and it closed behind them, leaving Josie in the front room with Ben and Ruth. The sudden absence of crisis made her legs weak. She stumbled to a chair and sat heavily. "He's going to die, isn't he?" Ruth whispered, her voice small and terrified. "No." Josie pulled her sister close, feeling the girl's thin body shake with cold and fear. "No, honey. Dr. Chen said she's seen worse. We got him here in time." "But what if we didn't? What if—" "No what ifs. Not right now." Josie pressed a kiss to Ruth's forehead. "Right now we trust that we did enough, that Danny's strong enough, that God isn't cruel enough to take another one of us." Ben moved to the stove, pouring tea into cups with hands that trembled. He brought them over, and they sat in silence, drinking liquid that burned going down, but spread warmth through their frozen bodies. The minutes crawled. 10, 20, 30. Josie counted them by the clock on the wall, each tick another moment. Danny fought for his life behind that closed door. Finally, it opened. Emmy emerged, Colt behind her. The doctor's face was neutral, giving nothing away. "He'll live," she said, and Josie felt the world tilt with relief, so intense it was almost painful. "The fever broke 5 minutes ago. He's sleeping naturally now, exhausted, dehydrated, malnourished, but alive." Ruth burst into tears. Ben made a sound that might have been a sob or a laugh, or both. Josie just sat there, unable to move, unable to process that they'd actually made it. That Danny wasn't going to die after all. "Can we see him?" she managed finally. "In a few minutes. Let him rest." Emmy's sharp gaze assessed them all. "When did any of you last eat?" The question hung in the air. Josie tried to remember. 2 days. 3. That's what I thought. Emmy moved to a cabinet, pulling out bread and cheese. Eat. Slowly. Your stomachs have shrunk. Too much too fast will make you sick. She set the food on a table, and Ruth and Ben descended on it with desperate hunger they couldn't hide. Josie wanted to stop them, wanted to preserve some dignity, but her own hunger roared to life at the sight of real food. Emmy watched them eat with an expression Josie couldn't read. Not pity exactly, something harder, something that looked like anger on someone else's behalf. "How long have you been without?" Emmy asked quietly. "We've had food," Josie said defensively. "Just not enough." "How long?" "Since our father died. 8 months. The admission cost her. "We've been managing." "Managing?" Emmy repeated the word like it tasted bitter. "Managing by starving slowly, by letting a 6-year-old get so sick he nearly died." "I did what I could." Josie's voice rose. "I kept us together, kept us alive. That's more than most would have managed." "You're right." Emmy's tone gentled slightly. "You did what you could with nothing. But now you're here, and I'm asking what happens next. Where will you go when your brother can travel?" The question Josie had been avoiding. She looked at the bread in her hands, unable to meet Emmy's eyes. "I don't know. Our land is forfeit. The Bridgers?" "I know about the Bridgers." Emmy's voice hardened. "Nathaniel bought my husband's mining claim 7 years ago, paid half what it was worth, took it before the papers were properly filed. My husband went into the mines anyway, trying to earn it back. Cave-in killed him and 3 others. Nathaniel paid for the funerals and thought that settled the debt." The bitterness in her words filled the room. Josie glanced at Colt, who stood by the window, his face carved from stone. "I'm not my father," he said quietly. "No. You're just the son who'll inherit everything built on graves and stolen land." Emmy's gaze was sharp as a scalpel. "But you brought sick children through a blizzard. You helped when you could have ridden past. Maybe that counts for something." "Maybe it doesn't." Colt turned from the window. "Maybe one good deed doesn't balance 100 bad ones, but it's what I can do tonight. So I did it." Silence settled heavy with history and hurt that couldn't be easily resolved. Ben broke it, his voice careful. "Thank you. For bringing us here. For saving Danny." Colt's expression softened. "You're welcome, all of you." He looked at Emmy. "Can they stay here tonight? I'll pay." "I don't want your money." Emmy's voice was flat. "But they can stay. I have rooms upstairs for patients who need watching. They'll stay as long as necessary." "How long is necessary?" Josie asked. 3 days at least. Your brother needs rest and feeding and watching to make sure the fever doesn't return. You all need the same, though less urgently." Emmy's expression was stern. "And before you protest about payment, I don't charge children who've been starved by rich men's greed." "We're not charity cases," Josie said, her pride flaring. "No, you're victims of a system designed to crush people like you. There's a difference." Emmy moved to the back door. "Come see your brother, then we'll get you all settled." Danny looked tiny in the clean white bed, his face peaceful in sleep. The flush of fever had faded, leaving him pale, but breathing steadily. Josie felt tears burn her eyes as she touched his forehead, feeling skin that was warm but not burning. He's really going to be all right. Yes, children are resilient, more than we give them credit for. Emmy adjusted the blankets. But he'll need care, proper food, rest warmth. Can you provide that? The question was blunt and necessary. Josie wanted to lie, wanted to say of course she could, but lies wouldn't help Danny. "No, we have nothing left." "Then you'll need help." Emmy's gaze found Colt, who'd stayed in the doorway. "Your father caused this. What are you going to do about it?" "What can I do?" Colt's voice was rough. "I can't change his mind about the land claim, can't force him to return what he's taken. Then give them somewhere else. Your ranch has land enough." You want me to just give them land? My father would what disown you, cut you off. Emmy's voice sharpened. Maybe it's time someone in your family chose decency over dynasty. It's not that simple. It's exactly that simple. You just don't want to pay the price. Colt's jaw tightened, and Josie saw the conflict warring in his face. The desire to help fighting against obligation and fear, and everything tying him to his father's empire. Let him alone, Josie said quietly. He's done enough. More than we had any right to expect. We'll figure out our own future. How? Emmy challenged. You're 24, with 3 siblings, no money, no prospects, and winter just beginning. What's your plan? I'll find work. Somewhere that'll hire a woman willing to do anything. Doing what? Cooking, cleaning, laundry. Emmy shook her head. Those jobs barely pay enough for one person to survive, let alone 4, and they won't hire you with children in tow. Then I'll send them back east, to our aunt in Boston. No. Ben's voice cracked across the room. We're not splitting up. We might not have a choice. There's always a choice. Ruth spoke up, her quiet voice carrying unexpected steel. We stay together. That's what Pa would have wanted. What Ma would have wanted. We stay together no matter what. Josie looked at her siblings, these 3 people who'd become her entire world, and felt the weight of responsibility crushing her. They were right. Splitting up would destroy them as surely as the fever had almost destroyed Danny. But keeping them together with nothing in winter, with nowhere to go. There is another option. Everyone turned to Colt. He stood in the doorway, his expression resolved in a way it hadn't been before. You could come to the ranch. All 4 of you. The words landed like stones in still water. Josie stared at him, unable to process what he was suggesting. Come to your ranch, where your father wants us dead or gone. He won't know, not at first. Colt moved into the room, his voice gaining certainty. The ranch is 50,000 acres. The main house is 3 miles from the nearest bunkhouse. My father spends most of his time in town or in his study. I can house you in one of the line cabins, bring supplies, keep you hidden until what? Until your father finds out and has us thrown out. Or worse, until I can convince him to let you stay. Or until I can arrange something more permanent. Why? Josie demanded. Why would you risk that? We're nothing to you. Colt was quiet for a long moment, his gray eyes holding hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. Because I'm tired of watching my father destroy people and doing nothing. Because you remind me that there are things worth fighting for beyond land and money. His voice dropped. Because my wife died 4 weeks ago, and I buried her and our child, and I've spent every day since wishing I could have saved them. I can't. But I can save you. I can do this one thing right. The raw grief in his words silenced every protest Josie had ready. She understood that desperation to fix something, anything, when the world had broken beyond repair. Understood the need to matter, to make a difference, to prove that loss hadn't rendered you helpless. This is insane, Ben said. Hiding on the ranch of the man who wants our land, that's survival. Ruth interrupted. That's survival. That's what Josie's been doing for 8 months. Whatever it takes. Whatever it takes might get us killed. We're already dying. Ruth's voice rose with passion unusual for her. Slowly out in that lean-to. At least this way we have a chance. At least this way we're trying something instead of just waiting to freeze or starve. Josie looked at Emmy, seeking guidance from someone not tangled in the emotion of the moment. It's dangerous, Emmy said bluntly. Nathaniel Bridger is not a forgiving man. If he discovers you on his property, he could have you arrested for trespassing. Or worse. She paused. But Ruth's right. You're out of options. And Colt's offering you time. Time to heal, to plan, to figure out what comes next. That's more valuable than gold right now. How long? Josie asked Colt. How long before your father finds out? I don't know, Could be days, could be weeks. The ranch is big enough that people go unseen all the time. I can make excuses for bringing supplies to the line cabin. Can say I'm checking fence lines dealing with winter preparations. He met her eyes. I can't promise it'll work forever, but I can promise I'll do everything possible to keep you safe. And when he finds out, what then? Then I stand between you and him. I tell him you're staying. Colt's voice hardened. I tell him that for once in his life, he doesn't get to take what he wants just because he wants it. That'll destroy your relationship with him. Maybe it's already destroyed. Maybe it's been destroyed since Mother died, and he decided empire mattered more than humanity. Colt's hands clenched at his sides. Maybe it's time I stopped trying to preserve something that's already dead. The words hung in the air, heavy with consequence. Josie felt the weight of decision pressing down, forcing a choice between impossible options. Trust this grieving man, who was also the son of their enemy, or refuse help and watch her siblings slowly die. If we do this, she said slowly, there are conditions. Name them. We're not prisoners. If we want to leave you, let us go. No questions, no arguments. Agreed. We work. We earn our keep. I won't be some kept thing hidden away and dependent. There's work enough. The ranch always needs hands. And if your father finds out you don't lie to protect us, we face it together or not at all. Colt nodded slowly. Together. You have my word. Josie looked at her siblings. Ben's face was tight with suspicion, but also hope he couldn't quite hide. Ruth watched with those knowing eyes, already seeing futures Josie couldn't yet imagine. And Danny slept innocent and trusting, believing his sister would keep him safe. All right, Josie said the words feeling like stepping off a cliff. We'll come to your ranch, but Colt Bridger, if you betray us, if this is some trick to... It's not. I swear on Rebecca's grave, on my mother's memory, on everything I hold sacred, it's not a trick. His voice was steady. You're taking a risk trusting me. I know that. I'm asking you to take it anyway. She studied his face, looking for deception, and finding only exhaustion and determination and grief that mirrored her own. Maybe that was enough. Maybe shared loss created a bridge between impossible circumstances. 3 days, Emmy said. 3 days for Danny to recover fully. Then you can travel. She looked between them. Use that time wisely. Plan what happens when Nathaniel discovers you, because he will. Men like him always do. Colt nodded. I'll come back tomorrow. Bring supplies. We'll work out the details then. He moved toward the door, then paused. Miss Fletcher, Josie. She looked up, meeting his gray eyes. Thank you. For trusting me. I know it costs you. Everything costs us, she replied. At least this time we might get something in return. He left the door, closing behind him with finality. Josie sat beside Danny's bed, watching her brothers sleep, and wondered if she'd just saved her family or doomed them. Emmy busied herself preparing the upstairs rooms, her movements efficient and practiced. Ben and Ruth helped the three of them, moving with the quiet purpose of people who understood hospitality. Given grudgingly was still hospitality. Alone with Danny, Josie let herself feel the full weight of what she'd agreed to. Hiding on Nathaniel Bridger's ranch, trusting his son, a man she'd met mere hours ago, with their lives, gambling everything on the hope that grief had made him different from his father. You'd better be right about this, she whispered to her sleeping brother. You'd better be worth all these impossible choices. But Danny just slept peaceful and healing, trusting absolutely that his sister would keep him safe. That trust terrified Josie more than anything else. Because Danny didn't know what she knew, that sometimes love wasn't enough. That sometimes trying your best still led to tragedy. That sometimes the only choice was between bad options and worse ones, and you picked the one that let you sleep at night. Emmy returned carrying blankets. The rooms are ready. You should rest, all of you. I need to stay with Danny. No, you need to sleep in a real bed, eat real food, and remember you're human, not just a survival machine. Emmy's voice was stern, but not unkind. Your brother is safe. I'll watch him tonight. You take care of yourself. I can't just... Yes, you can. You've been strong for 8 months. You can be weak for 8 hours. Emmy's expression softened slightly. Strength isn't refusing help. It's knowing when to accept it. Josie wanted to argue, wanted to insist she was fine, but exhaustion crashed over her like a wave. 8 months of holding everything together. 8 months of being strong enough for 4 people. 8 months of surviving instead of living. All right, she whispered. Just for tonight. Just for tonight, Emmy agreed. Tomorrow you can go back to carrying the world. But tonight, let someone else hold it for you. Upstairs the room was small but clean, with a real bed that looked softer than clouds. Ruth was already asleep in the other bed, curled up with Ben beside her, the two of them tangled together like puppies seeking warmth. Josie lay down still in her clothes, too tired to undress. The mattress cradled her aching body, and the blankets were heavy and warm. She closed her eyes, intending to just rest for a moment. She woke to daylight streaming through a window and the smell of cooking food. For a disoriented second, she didn't know where she was. Then memory crashed back the blizzard. Colt Dr. Chen Danny's fever, breaking the impossible offer of sanctuary. She sat up too fast, her head spinning. The room was empty. Ben and Ruth were gone. Panic flared before she heard voices from downstairs. Ruth's laugh. Ben's deeper rumble, Emmy's accented English. Josie stumbled downstairs to find her siblings at a table eating what looked like actual breakfast. Eggs, bread, something that might be bacon. Danny sat propped up with pillows, his eyes open and clear. Josie. He called, his voice weak but steady. Dr. Chen makes the best eggs. You have to try them. Relief hit so hard, Josie had to grip the doorframe. Danny was awake. Was talking. Was going to live. How do you feel? She managed. Hungry. And tired. But Dr. Chen says that's normal. He smiled, and it was the first real smile Josie had seen from him in weeks. She says I was very sick, but I'm going to be fine now. You are. Josie crossed to him, touching his forehead one more time to confirm his fever was truly gone. You're going to be just fine. Emmy appeared with a plate of food. Sit. Eat. We have planning to do. Planning. Colt came by this morning while you slept. He's coming back this afternoon with supplies. We need to discuss how this arrangement will work. Emmy's expression was serious. And we need to talk about what happens when it falls apart. You don't think it'll work. I think it might work for a while, but secrets have a way of revealing themselves, especially on ranches where everyone knows everyone else's business. Emmy sat down across from Josie. You need a backup plan, multiple backup plans, because trusting one man's protection is how women end up with nothing. The words were harsh but true. Josie had learned that lesson watching her mother trust her father's promises, watching him make decisions that hurt them all, because he believed he knew best. What kind of backup plans? Money, skills, connections. Emmy counted them on her fingers. You said you'd work. Good. Learn everything you can. Ranch skills, survival skills, anything that makes you valuable beyond just existing. Save every penny. Build relationships with people who might help if Colt can't or won't. You don't trust him. I don't trust anyone with that much power over someone else's survival. Emmy's gaze was steady. Maybe he's genuine. Maybe he'll protect you as promised. But maybe his father will threaten something he values more. Maybe his grief will fade and his conscience with it. Maybe he'll meet someone new and forget the family he's hiding in his line cabin. That's cynical. That's realistic. I've seen too many good intentions fail to believe in them absolutely. Emmy leaned forward. But I've also seen stubborn women survive impossible situations by preparing for failure while hoping for success. Be that woman, Josie. Take his help, but don't make him your only option. The advice settled into Josie's bones. Emmy was right. She'd been so focused on immediate survival that she'd forgotten to plan beyond it. Forgotten that accepting help meant owing debts, and debts had a way of becoming chains. "I'll learn," Josie said firmly. "Whatever I need to learn, I will, and I'll make sure we're ready to leave if we have to." Good. Emmy smiled for the first time, and it transformed her stern face into something almost warm. "Then eat your breakfast. You'll need your strength for what comes next." Colt arrived that afternoon with a wagon full of supplies that made Josie's breath catch. Food enough for weeks. Clothes in sizes that might actually fit. Blankets and medicine and tools and everything they'd been surviving without. "This is too much," Josie protested. "It's winter supplies for a line cabin, nothing unusual." Colt started unloading with Ben's help. "Anyone asks, I'm provisioning for fence repair crews who'll be working the North Range." "Your father will notice." "My father notices ledgers, not supply wagons. As long as the numbers add up, he doesn't care about details." Colt handed Ruth a box of clothes. "These were my wife's, Rebecca. She'd want someone to have them rather than sitting in trunks gathering dust." Ruth took the box carefully, as if it were something precious. "Thank you. We'll take good care of them." "I know you will." Something painful crossed Colt's face. "She was about your sister's size, maybe a bit taller. The seamstress in town can adjust what doesn't fit." "We can't afford—" "It's already paid for. Part of the supplies budget." Colt's voice was firm. "Accept it, Miss Fletcher. Pride's important, but so is not freezing to death." Josie wanted to argue but couldn't find the words. He was right, and they both knew it. Pride wouldn't keep them warm or fed. Pride wouldn't heal Danny or give Ruth proper clothes or help Ben grow into the man he needed to become. "Thank you," she said instead, the words inadequate for everything he was doing. "You're welcome." Colt looked at Danny, who sat wrapped in blankets watching the activity with bright eyes. "How's the patient?" "Hungry and bored. Dr. Chen says those are good signs." "They are. Means you're healing." Colt crouched to Danny's level. "What do you like to do when you're not sick?" "Read, if we have books." Danny's voice was wistful. "But we lost most of ours when Pa died." "I'll bring books. The ranch has a library, more books than any one person could read in a lifetime." "Really?" Danny's whole face lit up. "Any kind of books? Any kind. Adventure stories, histories, even some dime novels my mother pretended she didn't read." Colt's smile was genuine. "What's your favorite?" "Treasure Island. Pa read it to us before he got sick. We never found out how it ended." "Then that'll be the first book I bring. You can finish the story." Watching them, Josie felt something shift in her chest. This man who'd lost his own child was treating Danny with such gentle kindness, giving him the gift of stories and hope when both had been in short supply. Maybe Emmy was right to be cautious. Maybe this would end badly. But maybe, just maybe, it would end with them alive and together, and grateful they'd taken the risk. Colt stood brushing off his knees. 3 more days, then we travel. I'll have the line cabin ready. It's small but sound. Warm enough to survive winter." "How far from the main house?" 5 miles. Far enough that casual visitors won't stumble on you. Close enough that I can check on you regularly, without raising suspicion." "And your father?" "Rarely leaves the main house in winter. He's got business in town most days. When he's home, he's in his study with his ledgers and his plans for expansion." Colt's voice hardened. "We'll avoid him. Shouldn't be difficult. We avoid each other already." The pain in those words made Josie wonder what it cost him to go against his father, to choose strangers over family, to risk everything he'd inherit for people he'd just met. "Why are you really doing this?" she asked quietly. Colt met her eyes, and she saw the raw truth in them before he spoke. "Because I couldn't save Rebecca, couldn't save our baby. Couldn't do anything but watch them die. His voice was rough. But I can save you. I can do this one thing right. Maybe that doesn't balance the scales. Maybe nothing balances them. But it's something. It has to be something. Josie understood that desperation. Understood needing to matter to make a difference to prove that loss hadn't rendered you useless. It's something, she agreed softly. It's enough. He nodded, and in that moment something passed between them. Recognition, maybe. Two people drowning in grief and responsibility finding an unexpected lifeline in each other. 3 days later they loaded into the wagon again. Danny was stronger, able to sit up and take interest in the journey. Ruth wore one of Rebecca's dresses altered to fit by Emmy's skilled hands. Ben sat watchful and suspicious, but his belly was full, and his face had color for the first time in months. Emmy stood on her porch arms, crossed against the cold. "Remember what I said?" she called to Josie. "Backup plans. Always." "I'll remember. And come back if you need doctoring. Or anything else." "We will." "Thank you, Emmy. For everything." The doctor nodded, and Josie thought she saw something almost like hope in those stern eyes. Hope that maybe this time someone would beat the odds. That maybe the Bridgers didn't always win. Colt clicked his tongue, and the horses moved forward, carrying them toward their uncertain future. Toward a line cabin on enemy territory. Toward sanctuary that could become a prison if Nathaniel Bridger discovered them. Toward whatever came next. Josie looked back once, seeing Emmy's figure grow small in the distance. Then she turned forward, facing the unknown with her siblings beside her, and a stranger's promise as their only protection. The wind picked up, carrying snow that stung exposed skin. Winter wasn't done with them yet. Maybe it never would be. But they were alive. Together. Fighting. And sometimes that was enough. The line cabin appeared through the trees like something from a fever dream. Solid log walls, a stone chimney, already smoking windows that actually had glass. Josie had expected a shack. Maybe a lean-to with pretensions. But this was a real structure, the kind that could keep a family alive through winter. "I came out yesterday," Colt said, reading her expression. "Got the fire going, brought in supplies. There's a root cellar stocked with provisions and a well that doesn't freeze. Not luxury, but it'll keep you safe and warm." Safe and warm. Two things Josie had stopped believing in months ago. She climbed down from the wagon, her legs unsteady after hours of travel, and walked toward the cabin like she was approaching something that might disappear if she moved too fast. The door opened under her hand, and warmth rolled out to meet her. Inside was one large room with a sleeping loft above. An iron stove dominated one corner, already radiating heat. A table and chairs sat near the window. Shelves lined one wall stocked with canned goods and dry staples. Beds, actual beds with real mattresses, filled the far corner. "There's only 2 beds," Ruth observed, practical as always. "The loft has another," Colt said, pointing to the ladder. "I figured Ben might want space of his own. If not, we can arrange it differently." Ben climbed the ladder without comment, disappearing into the loft. He came back down with something almost like approval on his face. "It's good. Better than good." He looked at Colt with grudging respect. "You did this all yesterday." "Had help from Abe. He's the ranch foreman. Good man. I trust him." "Does he know about us?" "He knows I'm provisioning a line cabin for winter work crews. Doesn't know you're here specifically." Colt moved to unload supplies from the wagon. "Fewer people who know, the safer you are. Abe's loyal, but my father has ways of making people talk." The reminder settled over them like a cold wind. They weren't safe. They were hidden. There was a difference. Danny had fallen asleep again during the journey, exhausted by the travel. Despite Emmy's assurances, he was healing. Josie carried him to one of the beds, tucking blankets around his thin frame, with hands that shook slightly. "He'll need to build his strength back," Colt said quietly, appearing beside her. "Dr. Chen sent instructions. I've got them written down. What to feed him, how much rest he needs, signs to watch for if the fever returns." "You thought of everything." I tried to. He paused. Rebecca was sick for 3 days before she died. 3 days of me feeling helpless, not knowing what to do, watching the doctor work and being useless. I swore if I ever had another chance to help someone, I'd do it right. I'd be prepared. Josie looked at him, this complicated man who was saving them while mourning his own losses. She was lucky to have you. No, she wasn't. Because if I'd been enough, she'd still be alive. His voice was flat. But maybe you'll be luckier. Maybe this time preparation will be enough. Before Josie could respond, Ruth called from the door. There's someone coming, on horseback. Colt moved fast, reaching the window in 3 strides. His body went rigid. My father. The words dropped like stones. Josie felt her stomach clench with fear that tasted like metal. He can't know we're here. You said... I don't think he knows. But I need to go out there, talk to him, keep him from coming inside. Colt's mind was clearly racing. Ben, take your siblings to the loft. Stay quiet. Don't come down no matter what you hear. What if he hurts you? Ben's voice was tight. He won't, not physically. That's not his way. Colt's smile was bitter. He uses words, not fists. Easier to maintain respectability that way. Ben herded Ruth and a protesting Josie toward the ladder. She wanted to argue, wanted to stay and face whatever came, but Colt's expression stopped her. Please, he said quietly. Trust me to handle this. So she climbed into the loft, pulling her siblings close, and they huddled there in the dim space while Colt stepped outside to meet his father. The loft had gaps between the logs. Not big enough to see through, but enough to hear voices carried on the cold air. Colt. Nathaniel Bridger's voice was deep and authoritative, the kind of voice used to being obeyed. Didn't expect to find you out here. Could say the same about you. Don't usually see you riding fence lines in winter. Got a report from one of the hands. Said you've been coming out to this cabin regular, bringing supplies, spending time. A pause. Wanted to see what was so interesting about an empty line cabin. Josie's breath caught. Someone had noticed. Someone had told. The careful secrecy Colt had maintained was already unraveling. Nothing interesting. Just making sure it's ready for spring cruise. Spring's 4 months away. Preparation's never wasted. No, but it's usually purposeful. Nathaniel's voice hardened slightly. What are you doing out here, son? Really? Managing ranch property, like you taught me. Don't give me that. I taught you to manage efficiently. This isn't efficient. This is obsessive. You've been out here near daily for a week. That's not normal behavior. Beside Josie, Ruth had gone very still. Ben's hand found hers in the darkness, squeezing hard enough to hurt. Maybe I need the space, Colt said. Maybe being at the main house surrounded by her things, by memories, maybe that's harder than being out here alone. The mention of Rebecca shifted something in the conversation. Nathaniel was quiet for a long moment. Grief takes time. I know that better than most. Do you? Because when Mother died, you buried yourself in work and never came up for air. Is that what I'm supposed to do? Pretend she never existed? I'm saying you're young, you'll recover, you'll marry again, have other children, life goes on. I don't want life to go on. I want Rebecca back. That's not possible. So you make the best of what is possible. Nathaniel's voice took on a businesslike tone. Victoria's niece is still in town. Caroline. Nice girl, good family. She'd make a suitable wife when you're ready. I'm not interested in Caroline. You don't have to be interested. You have to be practical. The ranch needs an heir. You need a wife. Caroline needs a husband. It's simple mathematics. Marriage isn't mathematics. In our world it is. The sooner you accept that, the sooner you can move forward. A pause. The Fletcher situation is resolved, by the way. Their land is ours now. Papers finalized yesterday. Town council approved the foreclosure. In the loft, Josie felt the words like blows. Their land was gone. Officially. Legally. Everything her father had built, Everything her mother had loved now belonged to the man whose voice carried such casual satisfaction. "You sound pleased," Colt said, his voice carefully neutral. "I'm satisfied. That creek corridor gives us water access to the North Range. Opens up expansion possibilities. Good business decision. What about the family, the Fletcher children? What about them?" "Not my concern. They can go back east, or south to Mexico, or wherever people go when they can't make it on the frontier." Nathaniel's voice held no malice, just indifference. "The weak don't survive out here. That's nature's way. I'm just helping nature along. They're children. The oldest is 24 with 3 siblings to support. Their father died their mother before him. They were trying to survive with nothing. Then they should have asked for help. Who would have helped them? You bought their debt to force them out. The townspeople won't hire a woman with children. They had nowhere to turn. Not my problem." Nathaniel's voice was final. "Colt, you've got too much of your mother in you. She was always worried about the unfortunates, the struggling families, the hard luck cases. It's a kind impulse, but kindness doesn't build empires. Maybe empires aren't worth building." The words hung in the cold air. Josie heard Nathaniel's sharp intake of breath. "You don't mean that." "Don't I look what building this empire cost you? Mother worked herself to death trying to manage the household while you expanded. Rebecca died because I was gone surveying land when she needed me. How many people have we sacrificed on the altar of Bridger Ranch? Your mother died from illness, Rebecca from childbed fever. Those weren't my fault. Weren't they? Mother was exhausted, stretched too thin, vulnerable to sickness because she never rested. And I was surveying because you insisted we needed more land, needed to keep growing. If I'd been home, if you'd been home, Rebecca still would have died. Some things can't be prevented." Nathaniel's voice gentled slightly. "Son, I understand grief. I know how it twists thinking, makes you want to blame someone. But you can't blame expansion. You can't blame success. Those things keep us secure. We're so secure we're alone. You in your study, me in empty cabins, both of us pretending work fills the holes where people used to be." Silence stretched. Then Nathaniel spoke, and his voice carried something that might have been pain. "What do you want from me, Colt? What would make this right? I want you to stop. Stop taking land from desperate people. Stop building an empire on other people's suffering. Stop measuring success by how much you own instead of who you help. That's not how the world works. Then maybe the world's wrong. Or maybe you're too soft to see reality." Nathaniel's voice hardened again. "This land doesn't reward softness. It rewards strength, determination, the willingness to do what's necessary to survive and thrive. Your mother understood that even if she didn't like it. You need to understand it too." "I understand perfectly. I just don't agree." "Then you're a fool. And I didn't raise a fool." The sound of a horse shifting. "Come back to the main house. Stop hiding in empty cabins. Face your grief like a man instead of running from it." "I'm not running. I'm thinking. There's a difference. Thinking's fine. Brooding's destructive. Know what you're doing." Nathaniel's voice moved away like he was mounting his horse. "And Colt, whatever you're planning, whatever reason you really have for being out here, be careful. The frontier's dangerous. People get hurt in unexpected ways." "Is that a threat?" "It's a warning. From a father who's seen too many good intentions lead to bad endings." A pause. "Come home soon. Victoria's planning a dinner. Important people from town. Your presence would be appropriate." "I'll think about it." "See that you do more than think." Hoofbeats faded into distance. Josie counted to 100 before she allowed herself to breathe normally. Beside her, Ruth was crying silently, her thin shoulders shaking. Ben's face was hard as stone in the dim light. Colt appeared at the base of the ladder. "He's gone. You can come down." They climbed down in silence. Josie's legs felt weak, and her mind raced with everything she'd heard. Their land was gone. Nathaniel knew Colt was spending time at the cabin. The security they'd felt for 3 days was already crumbling. "He suspects something," Ben said flatly. "He suspects I'm grieving, which is true." Colt's jaw was tight. "He doesn't know you're here. If he did, he would have said something. My father's not subtle when he's discovered a secret." "But someone's watching you. Someone told him you've been coming here." "Ranch hands gossip. It's natural. Doesn't mean they know anything specific." "Yet," Josie found her voice finally. "They don't know yet. But Colt, your father's right. This isn't sustainable. You can't keep coming here without people figuring out why. So I'll be more careful. Come at night. Vary my routine." "That's not enough." Ruth spoke up, her voice still shaky but determined. "He already thinks something's wrong. He'll watch you closer now. We need another plan." "What plan?" "Where else can you go?" "I don't know, but hiding here depending on you waiting to be discovered, that's not surviving. That's just delaying the inevitable." Colt looked like he wanted to argue but couldn't find the words. Because Ruth was right. They all knew it. "We could leave Arizona territory entirely," Ben suggested. "Head to California, or north to Oregon." "With what money? What supplies in the middle of winter?" Josie shook her head. "We'd die before we reached the border. So we stay here and wait to be thrown out or arrested for trespassing. We stay here and figure out a real solution." Colt's voice was firm. "I meant what I said to my father. I'm done letting him destroy people. But he's right about one thing: thinking isn't enough. We need action." "What kind of action?" Josie asked. "I don't know yet, but I'll figure it out." He looked at each of them in turn. "You saved yourself through that blizzard. You kept your family alive through 8 months of hell. You're fighters, so we fight. We just need to figure out what we're fighting for and how to win." Danny stirred on the bed, his voice sleepy but clear. "Are we in trouble?" The question from the 6-year-old cut through the adult tension. Ruth went to him, immediately sitting beside him and smoothing his hair. "We're safe, Danny. Just talking about boring grown-up things." "I heard yelling. Outside. Was someone angry?" "Yes. But not at us." "Not exactly." Ruth looked at Josie helplessly. Josie crossed to the bed, kneeling so she was eye level with her youngest brother. "Someone was here who doesn't know we're staying in this cabin. We need to be extra quiet for a while. Can you do that?" "I can be quiet. I'm good at being quiet." Danny's face scrunched with worry. "But are we going to have to leave? This place is nice. I don't want to go back to the lean-to." "We're not going back to the lean-to. I promise." Josie made the promise before she could think better of it. Promises to children were sacred. Breaking them was unforgivable. "We're going to figure this out." "How?" The innocent question deserved an answer she didn't have. So Josie did what she'd been doing for 8 months. She lied to make him feel safe. By being smart and brave and sticking together, the way we always have. Danny seemed satisfied with that. He closed his eyes again, drifting back toward sleep with the easy trust of childhood. Josie wished she could do the same. Wished she could close her eyes and trust that morning would bring solutions instead of more problems. Colt was at the window, staring out at the darkening forest. "I should go," he said quietly. "Being here too long after my father's visit will raise more questions." "When will you come back?" 3 days. Give things time to settle. I'll bring more supplies and we'll make a plan." He turned to face them. "But Josie..." "You were right earlier. This isn't sustainable. We need something more permanent. I'll work on it." "Work on what?" "I don't know yet, but I'll figure it out. I have to." After he left, the cabin felt colder despite the fire. Josie moved through evening tasks on autopilot, preparing simple food from the supplies, settling her siblings for sleep, banking the fire for the night. Ruth helped without being asked, and Ben stayed watchful, checking the windows periodically, like he expected Nathaniel Bridger to return with armed men. When everyone was finally settled, Josie lay in her bed staring at the ceiling and trying to make sense of impossible mathematics. They needed money to leave, needed somewhere to go, needed time to plan and resources to execute any plan. And they had none of those things. What they had was a temporary shelter on enemy land, a grieving man's protection that could evaporate if his father pushed hard enough, and the same stubborn determination that had kept them alive this long. Maybe that would be enough. Maybe determination and luck and Colt's unexpected kindness would combine into something resembling a future. Or maybe they were just delaying the inevitable. Maybe Nathaniel Bridger's words were prophecy. The weak didn't survive on the frontier. They just died slower with more suffering in between. 3 days passed with agonizing slowness. Ben found work to do around the cabin, splitting wood, repairing a weak section of roof, checking the well. Staying busy kept him from dwelling on their situation. Ruth occupied Danny with reading from the books Colt had left, her quiet voice filling the cabin with stories of adventure and escape. Josie tried to do the same, tried to stay busy, stay positive, stay focused on small tasks that needed completing. But at night, fear crept in through the gaps in her determination. Fear that they'd survived the blizzard only to be destroyed by something slower and more inevitable than weather. On the third day, Colt returned at dusk. He looked exhausted, his face drawn with strain that went beyond physical tiredness. "What happened?" Josie asked immediately. "My father's planning a gathering, all the major landowners in the valley. He's making some kind of announcement about territorial development." Colt moved to the fire, warming his hands. "I don't know what specifically, but it involves consolidating land claims. He's been meeting with the territorial judge." "What does that mean for us?" "I don't know yet, but nothing good." He pulled out papers from his coat. "I've been researching, trying to find a legal way to protect you. There might be something in homestead law, a provision for families in your situation." "What provision?" "It's complicated, but essentially, if someone with legal standing claimed they'd taken you on as wards, adopted you informally, the debt your father owed might be dischargeable. You'd start fresh under new protection." Hope flickered, dangerous and painful. "Who would claim us?" Colt met her eyes, and she saw the answer before he spoke. "I would, if you'd allow it." The words hung in the air. Ben stood up from his chair by the fire. "You want to adopt us? Make us Bridgers." "Not exactly. It's more like guardianship. Legal protection without changing your names or identities." Colt spread the papers on the table. "My lawyer in Cottonwood helped me research. It's rare, but it's possible, especially if there's evidence of genuine care and provision." "Your father would never allow it," Josie said. "He doesn't have to allow it. I'm 29 years old. I can make my own legal decisions." "But it would destroy your relationship with him." "That relationship's already dying. Has been since Mother passed. This would just make it official." Colt's voice was steady. "I told you I'd figure something out. This is something. It's not perfect, but it might work." Ruth appeared at Josie's elbow, her journal in hand. She'd been writing in it constantly since they'd arrived, documenting everything. "What would it mean exactly if you became our guardian?" "It would mean you're legally under my protection. Your father's debts wouldn't transfer to you. The foreclosure wouldn't force you to leave immediately. You'd have time to establish yourselves to build something stable." "And what would you get?" Ben's voice was sharp with suspicion. "Nobody does something like this without wanting something back." "I'd get to help someone. I'd get to do something my father can't control or manipulate or destroy." Colt looked at Ben directly. "I'd get to honor Rebecca's memory by helping children who need help. She always wanted us to be that kind of family, the kind that gave back. This is how I do that. By making us a charity project. By offering you a chance. What you do with it is up to you." Josie felt the decision pressing down on her. Accept this offer and tie themselves legally to Colt Bridger, knowing his father would fight it. knowing it would create enemies and complications. Or refuse and watch their temporary shelter collapse when Nathaniel's patience ran out. "How long do we have to decide?" she asked. "Not long. My father's gathering is in 2 weeks. Whatever he's planning, it'll be announced then. We need to file the guardianship papers before that. Establish legal protection before he can maneuver around it." 2 weeks. "I know it's fast. I know you don't trust me. Don't have reason to." Colt's voice roughened. "But I'm asking anyway. Let me help you. Let me do this one thing right." Josie looked at her siblings. Ben's face was closed, suspicious, but also hopeful. Ruth watched with those knowing eyes, already seeing futures Josie couldn't map. Danny slept peacefully, unaware his sister was deciding his fate. "I need to think about it," she said finally. "Take tonight. I'll come back tomorrow for your answer." Colt moved toward the door, then paused. "Josie, whatever you decide, I want you to know you're not a charity project. You're people who deserve help. There's a difference." After he left, Ben exploded. "We can't trust him. He's a bridger. His father's the one who destroyed us. And he's offering to protect us from his father," Ruth countered. "Or trap us. Make us dependent so we can't leave." "We can't leave anyway." Ruth's voice rose unusual for her. "Where would we go, Ben? How would we survive? At least this gives us time. Time to heal. Time to plan. Time to become strong enough to actually make our own choices instead of just reacting to disasters." "She's right," Josie said quietly. "I don't like depending on him. Don't like tying ourselves legally to anyone. But Ruth's right. This buys us time. And if his father finds out, if he comes after us anyway, then we face that when it happens. But for now, this is the best option we have." Josie looked at her brother, seeing her own fear reflected in his eyes. "I know it's scary. I know it feels like giving up control. But Ben, we never had control. We've been surviving by luck and stubbornness. This is the first time someone's offered us something more. What if it's a trap? Then we spring it together." Josie reached for his hand. "But I don't think it is. I think Colt Bridger's a grieving man trying to do something good. Maybe that's naive, but it's what I believe." Ben was quiet for a long time. Then he squeezed her hand back. "All right. If you trust him, I'll try to trust him too. But Josie, if he hurts you, if he betrays us, then we'll handle it. Like we've handled everything else." That night, Josie lay awake again, but this time she wasn't drowning in fear. She was planning. If they accepted Colt's guardianship, what would that mean? Where would they live? How would they work? What happened when Nathaniel inevitably discovered them? Questions without answers. But for the first time in months, they were questions about building something instead of just surviving. Questions about a future instead of just the next crisis. When Colt returned the next evening, Josie met him at the door. "We'll do it. We'll accept your guardianship." Relief flooded his face. "You're sure?" "No, but we're doing it anyway." She stepped aside to let him in. "What happens now?" "Now we go to Cottonwood. File the papers with the territorial court. Make it legal before my father can interfere." Colt's expression was determined. "It'll take a day, maybe 2. Can you travel?" "Danny's well enough. We can manage." "Then we leave tomorrow at first light. The sooner this is official, the safer you are." Tomorrow. One more night in the cabin, then everything changed again. Josie felt the weight of decision settling over her, heavy, but also strangely freeing. She'd made a choice. Taken action. Whatever came next, at least they weren't passive victims waiting for fate to crush them. They were fighting back, and sometimes that was enough. The territorial courthouse in Cottonwood stood 3 stories tall, brick and mortar declaring permanence, in a territory where most buildings were wood and hope. Josie felt small climbing its steps. Her siblings clustered around her like chicks around a hen, all of them wearing Rebecca's altered clothes, and trying to look respectable enough to matter to people who decided fates with stamps and signatures. Colt walked beside them, his hand light on Josie's elbow, steadying without controlling. He'd been quiet during the journey, his jaw tight with tension that spoke of a man walking toward confrontation he couldn't avoid. "The clerk's name is Morrison," he said as they reached the door. "He's fair. Doesn't take bribes, doesn't play favorites. If the paperwork's in order, he'll file it. And if your father finds out before we file, he won't. I checked his schedule. He's in Phoenix meeting with territorial officials. Won't be back until tomorrow at earliest." Colt's voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed worry. "We file today. It's official before he knows what happened." They entered the courthouse into a world of echoing footsteps and hushed voices. Men in suits moved through hallways with papers clutched like weapons. Women waited on benches, their faces showing the patient exhaustion of people accustomed to waiting for justice that came slow if it came at all. The clerk's office was on the second floor. Morrison turned out to be a man in his 50s with spectacles and ink-stained fingers, the kind of man who'd spent his life documenting other people's lives while living quietly in the margins of his own. "Mr. Bridger." Morrison's greeting was respectful, but cautious. "Didn't expect to see you here. Your father usually handles legal matters through his attorney. This is personal business, not ranch business." Colt laid papers on the counter. "I'm filing for legal guardianship of these 4 individuals, Josephine Benjamin Ruth and Daniel Fletcher." Morrison's eyebrows rose slightly. He glanced at Josie and her siblings, taking in their youth, their obvious poverty despite clean clothes, the way they huddled together like they expected the world to strike. "The Fletcher homestead, that's the claim your father just foreclosed on." "It is." "And now you want to become guardian to the family he displaced." Morrison's voice was carefully neutral, but Josie heard the question beneath it. "That's unusual." "Legal guardianship isn't about property disputes. It's about providing for minors who've lost their parents." Colt's voice was firm. "Miss Fletcher is 24, but her siblings are 14, 11, and 6. They need protection and provision. I'm offering both." Morrison studied the papers, his expression revealing nothing. The silence stretched until Josie wanted to scream just to break it. "The oldest isn't a minor," Morrison said finally. "Guardianship typically applies to those under 18. She's the primary caregiver. Separating her from her siblings defeats the purpose." Colt leaned forward slightly. "The law allows for family units to be kept intact when it serves the children's best interests. This serves their best interests. Does it, or does it serve yours?" Morrison's question was blunt. "Forgive me, Mr. Bridger, but this looks suspicious. Your father takes their land, you take them. Looks like the Bridgers are acquiring people along with property." Josie felt heat rise to her face, shame and anger warring. She stepped forward before Colt could respond. "Mr. Morrison, I understand your concern. But Mr. Bridger isn't acquiring us. He's protecting us." Her voice shook slightly but held. "My father died 8 months ago. Left us with debts we couldn't pay and land we couldn't defend. Nathaniel Bridger took the land legally. That's done. But we're not done. We're still here, still fighting to survive. Colt Bridger offered us help when no one else would. If that makes us look weak or foolish or like property, then so be it. But we're accepting his protection because the alternative is death or separation. And I won't let my family be destroyed because accepting help looks suspicious." Morrison's expression softened slightly. He looked at her with something that might have been respect. "You've got spirit, Miss Fletcher. That's clear enough." He returned his attention to the papers. "These look in order. But I need to warn you, once this is filed, it's public record. Anyone can see it, including Nathaniel Bridger." "I'm aware," Colt said. "Are you aware what your father will do when he discovers this?" "I'm aware he'll be angry. I'm aware he'll see it as betrayal. I'm aware our relationship, such as it is, will likely end." Colt's voice was steady. "I'm aware of the cost. I'm paying it anyway." Morrison was quiet for another long moment. Then he reached for his stamp. "I'll file it. But Mr. Bridger understands something. Your father has influence in this territory. He could challenge this guardianship, could claim you're not fit, that you're acting out of grief rather than sound judgment. A judge might listen. Then I'll defend it in court. I'll prove I'm sound and capable and doing this for the right reasons. Even if it cost you everything. I already lost everything when Rebecca died. This gives me something worth fighting for again. Colt placed his hand flat on the counter. File it, Mr. Morrison. Make it official. The stamp came down with a sound like thunder. Morrison pressed the seal into wax, making permanent what had been tentative. Then he looked at Josie directly. Miss Fletcher, you and your siblings are now legal wards of Colt Bridger. That means he's responsible for your welfare, your housing, your education. It also means you're bound to his decisions until you reach legal majority or petition the court for independence. Do you understand what you're agreeing to? I understand we're trading one kind of dependence for another, but this dependence offers protection instead of just obligation. Josie met his eyes. I'm agreeing willingly. And you, young man, Morrison addressed Ben, you're old enough to have an opinion. Do you consent to this guardianship? Ben looked at Colt, then at Josie, then back at Morrison. His face was hard with the suspicion that poverty had taught him, but beneath it, Josie saw desperate hope. I consent, long as Mr. Bridger keeps his word about treating us right. I will, Colt said quietly. You have my word. Morrison made notes in his ledger, his pen scratching in the silence. When he finished, he handed Colt a stamped document. This is your copy. Keep it safe. You'll need it if anyone challenges the arrangement. He looked at them all with something that might have been sympathy. I hope this works out for you, all of you. But I've worked in this office 15 years, and I've seen enough to know hope and reality don't always align. Then we'll make them align, Josie said. We've survived this long on nothing but hope. Now we've got that and legal protection. That's more than we had yesterday. Outside the courthouse, the winter sun felt warmer than it had any right to feel. Josie stood on the steps, breathing cold air that tasted like freedom and fear in equal measure. It's done, Ruth said wonderingly. We're really protected now. We're really his wards, Ben corrected, but there was no bitterness in his voice. Just acknowledgement. For better or worse? For better, Colt said firmly. I promise you that. For better. They were halfway to Emmy's boarding house when the rider appeared. He came fast, his horse lathered despite the cold, and pulled up sharp when he saw Colt. Mr. Bridger been looking for you all morning. The man was young, maybe 20, wearing the Bridger Ranch brand on his coat. Your father sent me, says you need to come home immediately, says it's urgent. Colt's face went carefully blank. What's urgent? Didn't say, just said to find you and bring you back, said it couldn't wait. The young man glanced at Josie and her siblings with obvious curiosity. He didn't mention you'd have company. The company's not his concern. Colt's voice was cold. Tell my father I'll be home tonight. I have business to finish in town first. He said immediately, sir. Said it wasn't a request. Tell him I'll come when I'm finished. If that's not satisfactory, he can come find me himself. The rider looked uncertain, caught between two Bridgers, and unsure which one's orders to follow. Finally, he nodded. Yes, sir, I'll tell him. He rode off, leaving them standing in the street. He knows, Josie said quietly. He can't know. Morrison said the filing would take time to process into public records. Then someone told him. Someone saw us at the courthouse. Ben was scanning the street, his body tense. We need to leave, now. Leave and go where? Ruth's voice was small. The line cabin isn't safe if Mr. Nathaniel knows we exist. Emmy's, Josie decided. We go to Emmy's. She'll hide us until we figure out what to do. They moved quickly through Cottonwood's streets, trying not to run and draw attention, but walking fast enough that Danny complained his legs hurt. Colt carried him the last 2 blocks, and they burst through Emmy's red door like criminals fleeing judgment. Emmy took one look at their faces and moved into action without questions. Upstairs. Same rooms as before. Don't come down until I tell you it's safe. She turned to Colt. You need to leave. If Nathaniel comes here and finds you with them, it confirms whatever suspicions he has. I'm not leaving them defenseless. I'm defense enough. I've faced down angry men before. Emmy's expression was hard. You want to protect them. Go deal with your father. Draw his attention away from here. Make him focus on you instead of hunting for 4 children. Colt looked like he wanted to argue, but Josie touched his arm. She's right. Go. We'll be safe here. Will you? His gray eyes searched hers. Because if my father knows if he decides you're a threat to his plans, then we'll handle it, like we've handled everything else. Josie tried to sound confident. Go, Colt. Deal with your father. Come back when it's safe. He left reluctantly, and Josie herded her siblings upstairs into rooms that had become familiar through repetition. Danny fell asleep almost immediately, exhausted by travel and fear. Ruth pulled out her journal, writing furiously, like documenting events could give her control over them. Ben stood at the window watching the street below. What do you think his father will do? He asked quietly. I don't know, but nothing good. Josie sat on the bed, feeling exhaustion drag at her. They'd been running for so long, running from grief, from poverty, from foreclosure, from cold. She was tired of running, tired of fear, tired of every step forward requiring 3 steps back. Josie. Ruth looked up from her journal. If Mr. Nathaniel makes Colt choose between us and his inheritance, what do you think he'll choose? The question stabbed because Josie had been asking herself the same thing. Colt talked about honor and doing right and protecting them. But words were easy when the cost was theoretical. When Nathaniel actually demanded he choose when the inheritance and family name and everything Colt had ever known hung in the balance, would he still choose 4 strangers? I think he'll choose what he believes is right, Josie said carefully. But what if right and smart aren't the same thing? Then he'll have to decide which matters more. Hours passed. Emmy brought them food they barely touched. Danny woke and asked questions Ruth answered with reassuring lies. Ben wore a path in the floor with his pacing, and Josie sat and waited, and tried not to imagine all the ways this could end badly. Colt returned after dark, and the look on his face told the story before he spoke. He knows. Someone from the courthouse clerk's office told him within an hour of filing. He's furious. Colt's voice was rough. Called me a traitor. Said I was destroying the family legacy for sympathy and guilt over Rebecca. Said he'd have the guardianship overturned. Can he do that? Ben demanded. He'll try. He's already talking to Judge Blackwood. They're friends or close enough. He's going to challenge my fitness as guardian. Claim I'm not sound, that grief has made me irrational. Has it? Josie asked quietly. Colt met her eyes. I don't know anymore. Maybe he's right. Maybe I am acting irrationally. But rational or not, I meant what I said. I'm not abandoning you. Even if it cost you everything. I already told you everything's already gone. Rebecca took it with her when she died. This gives me purpose again. Gives me something worth fighting for. He moved to sit beside her, his voice dropping. I know you don't fully trust me. Know you have every reason to doubt. But Josie, I'm asking you to believe this one thing. I'm not leaving you to face my father alone. What did he say exactly? Emmy asked from the doorway. What were his specific words? He said the Fletchers were a problem he'd already solved, and I was making them a problem again. He said he'd prove I was unfit, have the guardianship dissolved, and make sure you left the territory permanently. Colt's jaw tightened. He said family came first, and I was choosing wrong. What did you say? I said family should come first, but he'd forgotten what family meant when Mother died. I said building an empire on other people's suffering wasn't legacy, it was tyranny. I said I'd rather lose everything and have a clear conscience than inherit guilt. Emmy made a sound that might have been approval. How did he respond? He threw me out, Said I wasn't welcome at the ranch until I came to my senses. Said I could sleep in line cabins with the other hired help since I seemed to prefer them to family. Colt's voice was flat. He's disowning me, making it official. Good, Emmy said, and everyone stared at her. If he's disowning you, he can't claim you're acting on his behalf. Can't say the guardianship is a Bridger Ranch scheme. It becomes personal choice, which is harder to challenge legally. That's a cold comfort when I've just lost my inheritance. Is it? What were you inheriting? Land and money and guilt? Now you've got freedom. Emmy's expression was stern. You're 29 years old, educated, capable. You can build something of your own instead of inheriting something stained with other people's suffering. Build it with what I've got. Some money Mother left me, but not enough to buy land or establish a ranch. Then don't establish a ranch. Do something different. Emmy looked at Josie. What were your father's plans before he died? Before the debts destroyed him? Josie tried to remember. It felt like another lifetime, those conversations around the table when Pa still believed in futures worth planning. He wanted to grow crops. Said the valley had good soil if you could get water to it. Wanted to establish a farm that could feed families instead of just cattle. Her voice softened with memory. Mother loved the idea. Said feeding people was holier work than raising beef for rich men's tables. There's your plan, Emmy said. Colt's got Rebecca's inheritance money. You've got farming knowledge. Combine them. Buy land somewhere Nathaniel doesn't control. Start a farm. Build something honest. That's insane, Ben said. We don't have enough money for land. Don't have equipment or seed or any of the things you need to farm. No, but you have time. Winter to plan, spring to plant. You work other people's land this spring, save money, learn more. Then next year you buy your own. Emmy's voice was firm. Rome wasn't built in a day. Neither are dreams. But they don't get built at all if you don't start. Ruth was writing furiously in her journal. We'd need $500 minimum for decent land and basic equipment. Maybe more if we want anything that doesn't require complete rebuilding. I have $400 from Mother's inheritance, Colt said slowly. And I can work. So can Ben. Between us, we could earn the rest by spring if we're careful. Where would we live while we're earning? Josie asked. Can't stay at the line cabin now. Can't stay here forever. There's abandoned homesteads scattered through the territory, Emmy said. Families who tried and failed. Their cabins sit empty. You could claim one, fix it up, make it livable. Not legal ownership, but shelter until you can buy proper land. We'd be squatters again, Ben observed. You'd be survivors again, Emmy corrected. There's no shame in using what's available to build toward what you want. They talked deep into the night, planning and arguing and slowly building something that looked almost like hope. Danny slept through it all, peaceful in his innocence. But the rest of them wrestled with details and possibilities and the terrifying prospect of trying to build something permanent in a territory designed to break people like them. Finally, near midnight, Colt stood to leave. I'll look for abandoned homesteads tomorrow. Find something suitable. We'll need to move fast before my father figures out where you are. He'll come looking, Josie said. Probably. But this territory's big enough to lose people who want to be lost. We just have to stay ahead of him until spring. Then we build something he can't take. After he left, Josie stood at the window watching snow begin to fall again. Behind her, Ruth spoke quietly. Do you think we can do this? Really build a farm and a life? I don't know, Josie admitted, but we're going to try. What if we fail? Then we fail knowing we tried. That's more than we had before. Ruth came to stand beside her sister, the two of them watching snow blanket the street in white that looked almost peaceful. Pa would be proud of you, of how hard you're fighting to keep us together. Josie felt tears burn her eyes. I hope so, because I'm terrified every single day that I'm making the wrong choices, that I'm going to get you all killed through stubbornness or pride or sheer stupidity. But you keep going anyway. That's courage. Or desperation. Hard to tell the difference sometimes. Ruth took Josie's hand, squeezing gently. I don't think it matters. Courage or desperation, either way you're fighting. That's what matters. 3 days later, Colt found an abandoned homestead 20 miles south of Cottonwood. The cabin was rough, but sound, the well still good, the land showing signs of past cultivation. The family who'd built it had disappeared 2 years ago, fled debt or died of illness, or simply given up, no one knew which. It's not much, Colt said as they stood looking at the building. But it's shelter, and far enough from my father's usual territory that he won't stumble on you accidentally. It's perfect, Josie said, and meant it. Perfect not because it was beautiful or comfortable or anything approaching luxury. Perfect because it was possibility, a place to start, a foundation to build on. They moved in that afternoon, carrying their few possessions and Emmy's donations, and hope that weighed nothing but somehow felt heavier than all the rest. Ben immediately set to repairing the worst damage. Ruth organized supplies with the efficiency of someone much older. Danny explored with 6-year-old enthusiasm, declaring it better than the lean-to, and therefore acceptable. Colt worked alongside them, and Josie watched him transform from rancher's son to simple laborer. He split wood without complaint, hauled water, fixed the door that hung crooked, never once acted like the work was beneath him, or like he was doing them a favor by helping. Evening found them exhausted around a fire in the cabin's stone hearth. They ate simple food and drank coffee that Colt had brought, and for the first time in months, Josie felt something that might have been peace. What happens now? She asked quietly. Now we work. I can get hired on at ranches nearby. Ben too, if he's willing. We earn money through winter. Come spring we buy seed and equipment. Start small. Build careful. Colt stared into the fire. Won't be easy. Probably won't be quick. But it's possible. And your father? He'll keep trying to destroy this. Might succeed. But at least we'll have tried something worth doing. He looked at her directly. Josie, I need you to understand something. I'm not doing this to trap you, or control you, or make you dependent. The guardianship is legal protection, not ownership. You want to leave, you leave. You want to make your own choices, you make them. I'm offering partnership, not dictatorship. Partnership, Josie repeated, testing the word. It felt strange, foreign. She'd been independent for so long, responsible for everything that sharing decisions seemed almost impossible. But also necessary. Also right. Partnership, she agreed. We build this together. Equal partners. Equal partners, Colt echoed and held out his hand. Josie took it, feeling calluses that matched her own. Working hands. Honest hands. Hands that had saved her brother's life and given her family a chance at something beyond mere survival. Outside, snow fell heavier, burying the valley in white that would last until spring. But inside the rough cabin, 5 people who'd become family through choice rather than blood sat around a fire and planned futures worth fighting for. And somewhere north, in a ranch house that had become a mausoleum for a grieving man's empire, Nathaniel Bridger stood at his window and wondered when exactly he'd lost his son to people who had nothing except stubborn dreams and each other. The war was coming. Both sides knew it. But for tonight, in this small cabin built on hope and desperation and partnership, Josie Fletcher let herself believe that sometimes the people with nothing beat the people with everything. Sometimes love was stronger than empire, and sometimes that was enough. Winter wore on with the slow cruelty of something that knew it had time. January turned to February, and the snow that had seemed almost beautiful that first night became an enemy they fought daily. But they fought together, and that made the difference. Colt found work at a ranch 40 miles west, too far to visit daily, but close enough to send money weekly. Ben hired on with a cattle outfit that needed winter hands. His youth offset by desperation that made him work twice as hard as men twice his age. The money came slow but steady, And Josie kept careful accounts in the margins of her mother's Bible, watching numbers grow toward the dream of $500 and land that belonged to them absolutely. She took in sewing when she could, mending clothes for families who had more children than time. Ruth helped her small fingers quick with a needle, and together they earned pennies that became dimes that became dollars. Danny grew stronger, his fever a fading memory, and spent his days reading the books Colt brought and asking questions about everything. They were surviving. More than surviving, they were building something. But Nathaniel Bridger hadn't forgotten them. The first sign came in late February when a man appeared at their cabin asking questions. He claimed to be a territorial census taker, but his eyes were too sharp and his questions too specific about who owned the property and who'd given them permission to be there. "We're not squatting," Josie told him, her voice steady despite fear that made her hands shake. "This land's abandoned. We're making use of what no one else wanted." "Abandoned land still belongs to the territory, or to whoever holds the claim." The man's smile was unpleasant. "Just seems odd. 4 people living here. No adult male head of household. Makes a person wonder about the arrangement." "Wonder all you want. We've got legal guardianship papers filed with the territorial court. We're here legally." Legal guardianship from Colt Bridger, Nathaniel Bridger's disowned son. The man's voice carried satisfaction. "Whole territory's talking about it. The Bridger heir throwing away his inheritance for—" He looked at them with open contempt. "For charity cases." Ruth stepped forward before Josie could stop her. "We're not charity cases. We're people who lost everything and are building it back. Maybe that's a concept you don't understand, living off asking nosy questions for money. But some of us actually work." The man's face darkened. "Careful, girl. Smart mouth can get you in trouble. So can trespassing on private property, asking questions you've got no right to ask." Ben appeared in the doorway, and though he was only 14, something in his stance made the man step back. "Think you'd better leave now." The man left, but his parting words hung in the cold air. Nathaniel Bridger doesn't forget people who cross him, and he doesn't forgive. You tell Colt that. Tell him his father's got a long memory and all the time in the world. After he left, Josie found she was shaking. Not from cold, from anger and fear and the exhaustion of constantly watching over her shoulder. "He's going to keep coming after us," Ben said quietly. "Nathaniel, he's going to keep sending people, keep pressuring, keep trying to break us." "Let him try." Ruth's voice was fierce. "We've survived worse than angry rich men." "Have we? Because rich men have power, we don't. They have influence and money and ways of destroying people that don't involve violence. That makes them more dangerous than weather or hunger. Then we'll be more stubborn than they are powerful." Josie pulled herself together, forcing steel into her spine. "We've come this far. We're not quitting now." But that night, alone in the dark, while her siblings slept, Josie let herself feel the full weight of fear. They'd made an enemy of someone who controlled half the territory. Someone who saw them as problems to be solved rather than people to be respected. How long could they really hold out against that kind of power? She didn't have an answer. So she did what she'd been doing for months. She got up the next morning and kept fighting. Colt arrived 3 days later with news that made her blood run cold. "My father's called a meeting. All the major landowners, territorial officials, Judge Blackwood. He's making his announcement about land consolidation." Colt's face was grim. "And he specifically mentioned the Fletcher situation as an example of why stronger property laws are needed." "What does that mean?" "It means he's using you as proof that homestead claims are too easily challenged. That squatters, his word not mine, can exploit abandoned land without proper authority. He's arguing for stricter enforcement, quicker foreclosures, and territorial oversight of who can claim guardianship of displaced families." Josie felt sick. "He's making laws to destroy us specifically. He's making laws that will affect hundreds of families like yours, using you as the example to justify it." Colt's hands clenched. If he succeeds, the guardianship could be invalidated. You could be declared wards of the territory instead of my wards. They could separate you, send you to different families or institutions. No. The word came out hard. We're not separating. We're not. I know. That's why we need to act first. Colt pulled out papers from his coat. I've been talking to other homesteaders, families who've been pushed out or are fighting foreclosure. There's enough of us to make noise, to protest at the meeting, to show the territorial officials that Nathaniel's reforms hurt real people. A protest. Ben had been listening from his perch by the fire. Against the most powerful man in the territory, that's suicide. Maybe. But it's also the only move we have. Colt looked at Josie. I won't force you into this. You've already risked enough. But if we don't fight now publicly, we lose everything quietly. At least this way people see. People know. Maybe that matters. Or maybe it just makes us targets. You're already targets. The question is whether you want to be quiet targets or loud ones. Josie thought of her father, who'd believed in speaking truth to power, who'd published newspapers back east calling for abolition when it was dangerous, who'd come west believing in fresh starts and honest work and the possibility that good people could build good lives. He'd died believing those things. Maybe that made him a fool, or maybe it made him brave. We'll protest, Josie said. All of us. We'll stand up and make them see we're real people, not just problems to be solved. The meeting was scheduled for March 15th in the Cottonwood Town Hall. Colt spent the intervening weeks gathering support, riding between homesteads and small ranches, talking to people who'd been hurt by consolidation or feared they'd be next. By the time the meeting arrived, he'd assembled nearly 50 families willing to speak. Josie dressed carefully that morning, wearing Rebecca's best dress that Emmy had altered. She braided Ruth's hair and made sure Ben's shirt was clean, and Danny looked as respectable as a 6-year-old could look. They were going to face Nathaniel Bridger and everyone who mattered in the territory. They needed to look like people worth listening to. The town hall was packed. Landowners filled the front rows dressed in suits that cost more than the Fletcher family had earned in a year. Behind them, homesteaders and small ranchers crowded together, their worn clothes and weathered faces, telling stories of hard work and harder lives. And in the very back, standing because all the seats were taken, Josie and her siblings waited with Colt beside them. Nathaniel Bridger stood at the front with Judge Blackwood and several territorial officials. He looked exactly like Josie had imagined, silver-haired, commanding, wearing authority like a tailored coat. When he spoke, his voice carried easily through the hall. Gentlemen, we're here to discuss the future of land management in Arizona Territory. As you know, our current system allows for too much exploitation. Abandoned claims become squatter territory. Foreclosed land sits in legal limbo. Families without proper documentation claim guardianship arrangements that serve no one's interests. He was looking directly at Colt as he said it. The implication was clear. I'm proposing stricter oversight, faster foreclosure processes, and territorial review of all guardianship arrangements, particularly those that appear designed to circumvent legitimate property transfer. Nathaniel's voice was reasonable, logical, the voice of someone solving problems rather than creating them. These reforms will bring order to chaos, will ensure only serious claimants hold land, will protect against exploitation. A murmur of agreement ran through the front rows. The landowners liked what they were hearing. Order meant control. Control meant they kept what they had and could take what they wanted. But Colt was already moving forward, cutting through the crowd with purpose. Father, I'd like to address the gathering. Nathaniel's expression went cold. This is a meeting for legitimate landowners. You forfeited that status when you chose sentiment over sense. I'm a property owner. I've got Rebecca's inheritance invested in land contracts. That makes me legitimate enough. Colt's voice was steady. And I'm here to speak for the people your reforms will destroy. You're here to embarrass yourself and me. Sit down, Colt. No. The single word rang through the hall. I won't sit down while you rewrite laws to hurt innocent people. I won't be silent while you use my guardianship of the Fletcher family as an excuse to consolidate more power. Judge Blackwood cleared his throat. Mr. Bridger the Younger, you're out of order. Then I'll be out of order loudly. Colt turned to face the gathered crowd. My father's talking about exploitation, but who's really exploiting whom he bought the Fletcher family's debt for pennies, foreclosed on their land before they could recover from their father's death, then sent men to harass them when they tried to survive on abandoned property. When I offered them legal protection through guardianship, he called it sentiment, called it circumventing property transfer. But what it really is mercy. Something this territory seems to have forgotten. That's enough. Nathaniel's voice was sharp. You're speaking from grief, not reason. Everyone knows you're not yourself since Rebecca died. You're right. I'm not myself. The self I was before would have stayed quiet, would have let you destroy another family without speaking up, would have inherited your empire and your guilt and called it legacy. Colt's voice rose. But Rebecca's death taught me something. Taught me that legacy isn't land or money or power. It's what you build that outlasts you. And I don't want to be remembered as the man who stood by while innocent people suffered. Josie felt her throat tighten. She hadn't expected this. Hadn't expected Colt to stand so publicly against his father. To risk not just inheritance, but reputation and social standing and everything men like him were taught to value. But he wasn't done. My father says abandoned land becomes squatter territory. But maybe that's because his foreclosures create abandoned land. Maybe families leave because men like him make survival impossible. Maybe the problem isn't too much freedom for homesteaders. Maybe it's too much power for empire builders. The homesteaders in the back began to nod. A few called out agreement. The energy in the room was shifting. Nathaniel felt it too. His face darkened. You're a fool, boy, speaking against your own interests, against your family. No, I'm speaking for my family, the family I chose, the 4 people you're trying to destroy because they inconvenience your plans. Colt gestured to the back where Josie stood. Come forward, all of you. Let them see who they're voting to hurt. Josie's legs didn't want to move. Fear had frozen her. But Ruth took her hand, and Ben took her other hand, and together they walked forward through the crowd that parted for them. Danny clung to Ben's coat, his eyes huge with fear and confusion. They reached the front, and suddenly Josie was standing before everyone who mattered in the territory. Everyone who'd ignored them or turned them away or benefited from their suffering. She wanted to run, wanted to hide, wanted to be anywhere but here. But Colt's voice was steady beside her. This is Josephine Fletcher, 24 years old. She's kept her siblings alive for 8 months after losing both parents. She's survived poverty and illness and winter and your father's foreclosure. She's done it with no resources except determination and love. Tell me, Father, how is that exploitation? How is helping her circumventing anything except your cruelty? Nathaniel's face was stone. She's a sad case, but cases like hers are why we need reforms. Sentiment doesn't serve the territory's long-term interests. No, sentiment doesn't serve your interests. There's a difference. Colt turned to Judge Blackwood. Your Honor, I'm asking you to consider what these reforms really mean. Faster foreclosures mean more displaced families. Stricter oversight means territorial control of private decisions. And invalidating guardianship arrangements means children separated from siblings, people thrown into institutions or worse. Is that really the Arizona territory we want to build? Blackwood looked uncomfortable. His eyes moved from Nathaniel to Colt to Josie and her siblings. Mr. Bridger the Elder has made valid points about legal clarity. Legal clarity that happens to expand his holdings and eliminate competition. That's not reform. That's consolidation dressed up as public good. Colt's voice was hard. And I'm asking you to see it for what it is. Emmy pushed through the crowd, her presence commanding despite her small stature. Judge Blackwood, I'm Dr. Emmeline Chen. I treated Daniel Fletcher when he was dying from fever. I've watched this family fight for survival while men with power tried to crush them. Mr. Nathaniel Bridger's reforms aren't about order. They're about eliminating obstacles to his expansion. And if you approve them, you're complicit in destroying every small family trying to build a life in this territory. Others began to speak. A rancher who'd lost land to Bridger foreclosure. A widow whose husband had died in Bridger-owned mines. A farmer whose water access had been cut off when Nathaniel bought upstream property. Story after story, building into a chorus of voices that couldn't be ignored. Nathaniel tried to regain control. These are isolated incidents. Unfortunate but not representative of standard business practices. They're not isolated. A man stood from the middle rows. Josie recognized him, Abe Washington, the Bridger Ranch foreman. Mr. Bridger, I've worked for you 15 years. I've watched you go from hard but fair to ruthless. Since Mrs. Rebecca died, since grief made you mean, you've used power without mercy. These reforms are just more of the same. The betrayal on Nathaniel's face was almost painful to watch. His most loyal man speaking against him publicly. Abe, you're fired. Expected that. Worth it. Abe looked at Colt. Your boy's right. Rebecca would have wanted this. Would have stood with these people. I'm standing with them for her memory. The room erupted in voices. Some supporting Nathaniel, some supporting reform, but most expressing doubt and concern. Judge Blackwood called for order, his gavel coming down repeatedly. Finally, he stood. I'm tabling the reform proposals, sending them back to committee for review. We'll reconvene in 3 months after proper public comment period. He looked at Nathaniel. Mr. Bridger, I respect your concerns, but this gathering has raised valid questions about unintended consequences. We need more time. It wasn't victory, but it wasn't defeat either. It was time. Precious time to build and plan and become strong enough to withstand whatever came next. Nathaniel left without looking at his son. The crowd dispersed slowly, homesteaders celebrating small triumph, while landowners muttered about sentiment over sense. And Josie stood with her siblings and Colt and felt the weight of what they'd just done. We made an enemy for life, Ben observed. We made a stand, Ruth corrected. There's a difference. Is there? Because we still don't have land, still don't have security. We just delayed the inevitable. No. Josie's voice was firm. We changed the inevitable. We showed people we matter, that we're willing to fight. That's not nothing. Colt was quiet, staring at the door his father had left through. Josie touched his arm gently. I'm sorry. About your father. About making the break complete. Don't be. It was already broken. This just made it honest. He looked at her, and something in his eyes made her breath catch. Josie, there's something I need to tell you. Something I should have said weeks ago. What? I didn't do this just for guardianship. Didn't offer protection just to honor Rebecca's memory or prove something to my father. His voice dropped. I did it because somewhere between finding you in that blizzard and watching you fight for your family, I started caring. About you specifically. About the possibility of building something with you. Josie felt her heart hammer. Colt, You don't have to say anything. I know the guardianship complicates things. Know you might see me as obligation rather than choice. But I wanted you to know. Wanted it said before anything else happened. Why now? Because I stood in that hall and spoke truth I've needed to speak for years, and it felt like finally being honest about what matters. You matter, Josie, not as a ward. As a woman I respect and admire and... He stopped, seeming to struggle. As someone I could love, if you'd allow it. The words hung between them. Josie thought of everything that had happened. The blizzard, the fever, the cabin, the guardianship. All of it building toward this moment where a man who'd lost everything was offering her his heart along with his protection. She thought of Rebecca dead 4 months and wondered if it was too soon. Thought of the complications and the gossip and the ways this could make everything harder. Then she stopped thinking and let herself feel. I can't promise love yet. Can't promise anything beyond gratitude and respect and the beginning of trust. She met his eyes. But Colt, I can promise I'll try. That I'll be honest. That if something grows between us, I'll tend it carefully instead of running from it. His smile was worth everything they'd risked. That's enough. More than enough. They walked back to their cabin in the fading light, 5 people who'd become family and might become something more. The winter was ending. Spring would come with planting and building and all the hard work of turning hope into reality. But for now, they had this: protection and partnership and the promise of possibilities worth fighting for. 3 months passed in blur of work and planning. The money grew to $530. Enough for land and equipment and a chance at the farm Josie's father had dreamed about. They bought 40 acres along the Verde River land with good soil and reliable water and no bridger claims attached. Breaking ground that first day felt like resurrection. Josie stood with a shovel in her hands and felt her father's presence so strongly it made her chest ache. This was his dream, his vision, and she was making it real. Ben worked beside her 14, but strong with winter labor. Ruth kept accounts with the precision of someone twice her age. Danny ran between them all, bringing water and asking questions and simply being alive and healthy and happy. And Colt worked harder than any of them, proving through sweat and calloused hands that his commitment was real and lasting. The first crops went in under spring sun: corn and beans and squash. The 3 sisters Pa had called them. Plants that supported each other grew stronger together than separate, like family. Judge Blackwood's committee met again in June and quietly killed Nathaniel's reforms. The territorial governor had gotten wind of public opposition and wanted no part of controversial land laws in an election year. It was political calculation rather than justice, but the result was the same homesteaders could breathe easier. Nathaniel himself remained distant and silent. He didn't apologize, didn't acknowledge his son except through cold absence. But he stopped actively opposing them, and sometimes that was the best you could hope for. On a warm evening in July, Colt asked Josie to walk with him by the river. They moved in comfortable silence, watching water flow past on its endless journey south. "The corn's coming in strong," he said finally. "It is. Better than Pa ever managed. The soil here is good." "It's not just the soil. It's the care, the attention." He stopped, turning to face her. "Josie, I told you in March that I could love you if you'd allow it. I need to correct that statement." Her heart clenched. "Oh, I don't could love you. I do love you. Have for months. Watching you build this farm. Watching you raise your siblings. Watching you turn survival into thriving. I love you completely." His voice roughened. "And I'm asking if maybe when enough time has passed, that it's proper you'd consider marrying me. Not because of guardianship or obligation, because of choice." Josie looked at this man who'd saved her family and loved them into wholeness. This man who'd given up inheritance for integrity. Who'd stood against his father for people he barely knew. Who'd worked himself raw to help build someone else's dream. "Rebecca's only been gone 7 months," she said carefully. "I know. I'm not asking for now. I'm asking for someday. When grief has loosened its grip, when you're certain I'm not just looking for replacement or refuge." His gray eyes held hers. "I loved Rebecca completely. Her death shattered me. But Josie, loving you doesn't diminish that. It honors it. She'd want me to live, to love again, to build something beautiful from grief." "You're sure?" "I'm sure of you. Sure of this family we've built. Sure that what we have is worth making permanent." He took her hands. "Say you'll think about it at least." Josie thought about the future they were building. Thought about partnership becoming permanence. Thought about her siblings having a father figure who chose them deliberately. Thought about herself having a partner who saw her as equal rather than dependent. I don't need to think about it, she said quietly. Yes. Someday, when proper time has passed, I'll marry you. I'll choose you the way you chose us. His kiss was gentle and certain, and tasted like promise. A year later they married in a small ceremony with Emmy officiating and 50 homesteading families celebrating. Ruth caught the bouquet and declared she'd never marry. Ben gave Josie away with the solemnity of someone who understood he was entrusting his sister to someone worthy. Danny scattered flower petals with enthusiasm that made everyone laugh. And Nathaniel Bridger stood at the back of the gathering, uninvited but present. When it was over, he approached slowly. Son, Father, I was wrong about a great many things, but primarily about this. Nathaniel looked at Josie, and something in his stern face softened almost imperceptibly. You built something honest, something Rebecca would have loved. I can't undo the hurt I caused, can't take back words or actions, but I wanted you to know I see what you've built, and He struggled visibly. I'm proud of you. It wasn't reconciliation, wasn't forgiveness or restoration, but it was acknowledgement, and sometimes that was enough. Colt nodded slowly. Thank you. That matters. Nathaniel left without staying for the celebration. But the fact that he'd come, that he'd spoken, meant something was shifting. Grief was loosening its grip on them all. The farm prospered. The Fletcher Bridger homestead became known throughout the territory as an example of what determination and partnership could build. They hired hands in busy seasons, paying fair wages and treating workers like humans rather than tools. They fed families through hard winters. They took in orphans and gave them work and hope. Danny grew up healthy and strong, educated beyond what most frontier children could hope for. He became a teacher, carrying his father's love of learning forward. Ruth became a writer, documenting homesteader stories and fighting through words for justice her father had believed in. Ben took over the farm, eventually running it with the same fierce determination that had kept him alive through that terrible winter. And Josie and Colt built a life that honored every loss they'd endured by refusing to let grief make them small or mean or hopeless. On cold winter nights, when snow fell outside their warm home, Josie would sometimes remember that moment in the blizzard when she'd aimed her rifle at a stranger on horseback. That instant when she'd been seconds from shooting the man who'd become her salvation. She'd think about how close they'd come to disaster. How many small choices had led to survival. How trust given reluctantly had transformed into love given freely. And she'd thank God and fate and her parents' memories for those 4 words Colt had spoken that changed everything. All 4 of you, get in. They'd gotten in. They'd survived. They'd built something beautiful from loss and stubbornness and the refusal to let circumstance define them. The weak didn't always die on the frontier. Sometimes the weak discovered they were strong. Sometimes they found people willing to stand with them. Sometimes they built empires of love that outlasted empires of land. And sometimes that was exactly enough.